Hi. What I'd like to discuss this week is just raiding in general. Again, raiding is a big thing for me. I'm going to. It sort of runs in a little bit in parallel to the Legion video I've done this weekend as well. I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much if you're watching both. But what I'm wanting to talk about is the raiding model that we've had in WoD. I'm not so much looking ahead because I do that in the Legion video bit, but more actually looking back. And I want to compare. First thing I want to do anyway is compare the model that we had in MOP and the model that we had in Legion from the point of view of the middle tier raiding guild. So the ones who aren't going to complete in a given tier, the ones who, I mean, in the final tier, you get a lot more guilds completing the tier because you've got so much longer to do it. I mean, we're now in a position where the tier has been out for quite a while. There's a couple of hundred guilds killed it. There's going to be many more hundreds kill it because we've still got probably about another 7 or 8 months to go. But I'm talking about like a normal tier where you maybe get 6 months to do the tier, 5 or 6 months. We're talking about the guilds who probably wouldn't complete the whole thing. They might get a fair amount of the way through what was heroic and what is now mythic. Now, the model we have now is for organised raiding. You've got, let's take LFR out of it. You've got normal, heroic, and you've got mythic. So you do your normal mode. Maybe you do that quite quickly in your guild. Maybe you do it. It takes a few weeks or maybe a month or so. Then you progress to heroic. Now, there's a slight problem there, and I can well understand this, in that when you go from normal to heroic, it's no different. The fights are no different. They do more damage. You have to do more damage. You have to be able to heal more, DPS more, take more damage, all the rest of it. But the mechanics are almost exactly the same. So that in itself is a bit of a downer, I think, from a motivational point of view, because you could then be, there's a bot, you do a particular boss and you kill it, you know, relatively straightforward in normal mode after say a month of the tier being out, and then you're having your ass kicked by it on heroic mode, and you think it's the same fight. It's not a different mechanic we're wiping to here. It's the same mechanic. We're just not doing enough damage to me to check, or we're taking too much damage, or the fire that we could get away with standing in on normal, we can't get away with standing in now. And it must be incredibly frustrating, especially for the players who are coping with it. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is then you get through heroic and you complete heroic, and then you're in a position that a lot of guilds are now. They're in heroic, they're clearing heroic, they're able to farm it relatively efficiently now, and they're absolutely ready to go into mythic, but their guild isn't. So you've got players who are, guild that is not, because they're not set up for it. They are set up for raiding flexi mode, because that's what normal and heroic is, and they are not set up for having 20 people with reasonably tight constraints on which 20 within, you know, not absolutely tight, but, you know, reasonably. And the idea that they're expecting a few people on the bench, which just doesn't happen in most heroic guilds. Although heroic is designed for 10 to 30, in actual fact, when I look through logs, most guilds seem to have less than 20, which is not ideal. And then we compare that with MOP. So in MOP, before Flexi Mode came in, and Flexi Mode came in right at the end, so it was just something to test it out before they brought it out in Walls of Drunor, of course. And what the model there was, for those that aren't aware, is you just had normal and heroic. Yes, you had your LFR, but leaving that to one side. You had normal and heroic, where heroic is what we would now call mythic. And you progress through normal mode, and it was tuned a bit harder than the current normal, or even the heroic. It might, but, you know, the ones who were going to clear the heroic mode well within the tier time limit were always going to beat that in like a week or two. But the guilds who take longer, so they would take longer to progress through normal, but they would get there eventually, and then they'd start progressing in heroic. It was no different, you know, because it was the same size. They would either be doing 10 or 25 man, whatever, but it was the same size. You know, they didn't need any extra organisation in the guild. But the difference is that the fight that you could have killed more easily or not. And the lockout meant that you wouldn't be doing the same boss on normal and heroic anyway. You choose, are you going to do this boss on normal or are you going to do it on heroic? There was no doing both. So, you know, this boss that you could easily do on normal, you were progressing on heroic. Yes, you were getting your ass kicked. You might wipe all night on it. But at least it was different because there were different mechanics in there. There was something different you had to do. It was the same graphics and it was the same looking boss. And it had many of the same mechanics, but it had new ones as well. So it felt new enough that it wasn't as demoralising, dying to what is basically the same thing. Now, I sort of discussed in the Legion video a bit to the extent of, I mean, on the one hand, we don't want Blizzard to solve all the problems. Some of the barriers that people see in moving from heroic to mythic at the moment are entirely within themselves and nothing to do with the game. Mythic is absolutely accessible, but I talk about that in Legion video. I'm not going to repeat that in case people watch that as well. So go and watch that if you want to see what my ideas for that one are. But which raiding model was better? Because I don't think it's actually brought more people into raiding, the current raiding model. I always seem to work out, I think there's between about 10 and 15% of the player base do some sort of organised raiding. Every expansion, as far as I can tell, certainly it was the case in Villa, as far as I can tell. Obviously, this is using numbers that you get from various sources, and it's not absolutely 100% accurate. I don't have access to accurate data. Only Blizzard do. But yeah. But what I do worry about is each expansion, they bring in like quality of life features. So the current raiding model is a quality of life improvement. In other words, you haven't got people benched on the normal and heroic mode as it is now, because they can just come in. You can have more than 20. You can have fewer than 20 if a couple of people don't turn up and you're a bit scuppage, you haven't got enough. You can have fewer. Except in the hard mode, of course, which has to be tuned that way. But, and there are some quality of life features that are really good. Like AoE looting was like the greatest thing that Blizzard ever put into this game. Absolutely. It almost makes up for gnomes. It doesn't quite, but it's almost at that level where I almost forgive them for including gnomes in the game. Gnomes that I can't kill specifically. But then there are quality of life features that, I mean, because that one it wasn't more challenging to pick up loot for every single mob. It was just annoying. It just took longer. It wasn't more difficult. And I do think there's a distinction to be made between quality of life features that just tidy up the game for you and quality of life features that make something easier. Flying is the great example, because when flying didn't exist before TBC, no one was asking for flying. There wasn't a big, I say no one, maybe one person out of the 6 million or whatever was asking for it, I don't know. But there was no like community, we want flying. But people loved flying when it came in. Of course, it was great. Well, they're able to explore, look on top of, because you would in vanilla when you were going on your Griffin or your your Wyvern or whatever, and you were flying over things, you would look at they're quite detailed. The worlds Blizzard would put little scenes in, and you look at that. Oh, that's interesting. So there was interesting things seen. It would have been nice to be able to fly around it, but no one was really asking for it. It wasn't needed. In other MMOs, you don't have flying like that. No one cares. But then they brought it out in TBC, and then they kept it going. Now, at that point, of course, you have to keep it in. So when, during this expansion, they said, we're not going to have flying, it was a mistake, and we're not going to have it. And I sort of agreed with them. I think we could do without it. I have enjoyed WoD without the flying. But given that it has been in the game now for so long, and there will be relatively few who remember a time before flying, apart from leveling. You know, we're used to not having it while leveling, except I think Cataclysm was the only one where, at least on your first character as you leveled it up, you would still have had flying. But yeah, they can't take it away now, and that's where they went wrong. They just failed to realise it's now been out so long, it's such an ingrained part of the game, people will just go mad. And that's also a reason why I think you have to think very carefully. If Blizzard are going to bring a quality of life feature in, just think to yourself, do we really need it? Because if we don't, because once you put it in, you can't take it away. I mean, all of these popular quality of life features, like flying, like looking for dungeon, being able to randomly queue up for things like that, like looking for raid, You know, even the good ones like AoE looting and being able to mill a whole stack of herbs instead of just doing one at a time. Once you put it in, you can't take it away. They've tried that. They've learned that lesson the hard way, I think. So, and then we've had another one in the patch that was just announced this week. I did a video on that midweek. We're going to have cross-realm, because that's another quality of life feature, the idea of cross-realm, for Mythic. Now, I don't see any particular harm in that one, I have to say, because again, I mean, the rule I have is, if it's a quality of life feature that makes something easier, then I think they should think twice. This isn't something that makes it easier. Mythic is no easier because we can do this. But that's not to say that there are any potentially negative consequences of this. But I can sort of think of one that in theory might exist, but it's a bit off left field. So I'm not gonna moan about that one. But yeah, I was thinking about different modes of raiding and how accessibility to it does make it a bit more difficult for you to encourage raiders to step up and do the more organised raiding. Like what we really want, we're getting an absolute dearth of mythic raiders. We know that anyone who is recruiting in a mythic guild knows that there are fewer and fewer mythic raiders. Now, maybe part of that is just WoD. The fact that there wasn't anything for these raiders to do outside of raiding, and people do want to do that. And maybe it's not. I don't know. But there are certainly... It could just be because there's always people who leave raiding. You know, they get burnt out. They want to go and do something else. It's just that there's usually people coming up through, you know, newer players who are coming up to fill the spots. And that's just not happening, this expansion. And I don't think overall there's any more people raiding as a proportion of the player base than there ever were in the past. I already mentioned sort of that. You know, I mean, I was saying the Legion video again. It used to be, even in a modest guild, you would be raiding 5 or more nights a week in vanilla. Whereas now you can do raiding just once a week. I mean, you know. So there must be something else. It's not, when people say, oh, I haven't got the time for like doing serious raiding. You haven't got one night a week to play a game that you probably spend 20 hours a week spread across that week at least playing anyway. I mean, if you actually have a character capable of raiding in a pug, you've got one that's capable of having a night that says, do you know what, this is my WoW now, and I'll join a guild that does one night a week raiding in like normal and heroic. So I don't believe that. I think it's just easier, and I think Blizzard need to... They have reduced the rewards in LFR, of course, in WoD. I think they need to completely nerf the hell out of rewards for doing any content not in a raid group, like an organised raid group. You know, and this is one of the things I worry a little bit about Cross Realm, because you look at what Cross Realm's done to like normal and heroic mode. You've now got people pugging, so people can pug normal. They don't need LFR. Why would you use LFR anyway? LFR Hellfire Citadel is only for people to get their tomes if they can't get a full run pug, normal or heroic mode or something like that for the legendary ring. Because why else would you do it? It rewards gear that is no better, and in fact in most cases is worse, than the baleful gear you can get just for burning round Tanan Jungle and collecting the Apexis crystals. There's no point, and with mythic dungeons in the next patch, when you're going to get better gear from that, or a small chance of better gear, again, the actual LFR gear from Hellfire Citadel is worthless. It might as well not exist. Not that I'm, again, I said it in the Legion video, I'm going to say it here again, I'm not someone who's against LFR at all. I just think a few things need changing. And I think things will be changed. I don't think they will change it to what I want. I'm not one of those people who thinks, oh, well, I think this should happen. If Blizzard have got any brains, they will do this. Otherwise, they're just numpties. No. You know, they can disagree with me. I'm not gung-ho about the same thing myself. But I do think, yeah, there are easier ways to get raid gear. And people don't want to, you know, when you're in a raid guild, you're going to wipe all night on a boss, on a difficult. I'm not saying some raid bosses won't take a whole night to kill for the first time. Some will, and when you get to those ones, people just think, stuff it, I could do this much more easily. And people will take the path of least resistance. Nature is inherently lazy. Always takes the easiest route to anything. It doesn't mean that we won't, like, you know, when we're all hunter-gatherers, the old caveman days, if we saw some food at the top of an hill and some food at the bottom of the hill, we'll take the food at the bottom of the hill. But it doesn't mean to say if the food's not at the bottom of the hill, we wouldn't climb the hill to get the food up there. We will. And the same thing will happen to players. You know, as long as it's not too much of a challenge, as long as it's not too difficult, as long as players see an outcome as achievable, they will go to more effort. But anyway, just some general thoughts on raiding there. Now, the other things I'm going to go over, just a few up-and-coming things that I'm going to do. I'm going to do quite a few. I've got now a right list of Retribution-based videos for the rep players out there. As well as I am going to do some little guides on Mythic Hellfire Citadel, which should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Week after next, I have a bit more time to do it as well, because half term. So as a teacher, I'll get a bit more time to myself there. So there will definitely be all out then, but I'll be probably getting a couple out next week as well, if I can. In addition, I've sort of been asked to do a bit of a history thing of Retribution and myself. And at first I was a bit skeptical. I thought, do people really want that? But then I thought, well, I put a post actually some time ago on a forum about what I think Retribution Paladins do need in Legion. Not like you usually see on people on forums going, oh, I've got a list of new spells, we should all have these spells, it'd be really cool. Yeah, thanks. No, I mean little tweaks to what we already have. But I thought I would do a video on that, and I thought it might actually work out quite well. So I'm going to do a past, a present, and a future on the Retribution Paladin. As well as, I say, some guys. So there's like about 8 Retribution Paladin videos at least are going to be coming up. So keep an eye out for those. And also on some of the raiding ones, the Hellfire Citadel Mythic ones, may be of some interest to people on who don't play Retribution Paladin as well. There might be a few bits and pieces in there, but it will be predominantly from the Retribution Paladin point of view. But until next week, it's just a bit of a holder. I did the main video midweek with the news of the new patch. If anyone's got suggestions, things they'd like me to do, by all means, comments down below or just send me a message, whatever. And until next week, I'll see you later.